All right. Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 17. Then said I unto them, ye see the distress that we are in, how Jerusalem lieth waste, and the gates thereof are burned with fire. Come and let us build up the wall of Jerusalem, that we be no more a reproach. Then I told them of the hand of my God, which was good upon me, as also the king's words that he had spoken unto me. And they said, let us rise up and build. So they strengthened their hands for this good work. But when Sanballat the Horonite, and Tobiah the servant, the Ammonite, and Geshem the Arabian heard it, they laughed us to scorn and despised us, and said, what is this thing that ye do? Will ye rebel against the king? Then answered I them, and said unto them, the God of heaven, he will prosper us. Therefore we as servants will arise and build, but ye have no portion nor right, nor memorial in Jerusalem. The book of Nehemiah is one of the clearest pictures in all of the Bible about revival, about vision, about building and rebuilding, and about leadership. It's just a really, really good book. And how very fitting it is for what we're dealing with and what we're looking at doing. Anytime it parallels the church in many instances, and certainly a physical building and those kind of things that we're looking forward to doing, certainly fit right in. The city of Jerusalem had been devastated by Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians. The walls were completely torn down. Everything within Jerusalem, after 3 major invasions by Nebuchadnezzar, Jerusalem had been desolate. It was wiped out. When the Babylonian Empire faded away and the Medo-Persian Empire came in, they allowed a group to go back to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple, and Ezra has done that. Nehemiah is coming along wanting to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem after the temple has been rebuilt. And so there are a group of faithful Jews there, but the walls still are in disrepair and makes them very vulnerable. The gates had been burned, and the people were living in great reproach and distress because of the situation of Jerusalem. Yes, they had a temple, but everything was still in shambles and in rubbles. And no one was picking up the mantle to move them forward. What is both shocking and sad for the people who had left with Ezra and went back, they had accomplished some things, but what was sad was that they had learned to live in those conditions. God help us to never live in that kind of condition where things are not what they need to be, where things are not advancing and not moving forward. For years, nothing changed. The broken walls became normal to them. The burned gates became acceptable, and their current condition just was tolerated. But then God burdened a man named Nehemiah. It burdened his heart. He was not a king. He was not a general. He was just a man who was in captivity and serving in the palace there in Shushan. And God stirred his heart when he heard the news about Jerusalem and how it was in such a disrepair and such a reproach of God's people being able to live that way and be content in it. Well, he got a commission to go back and rebuild the walls, which would have been the next step in rebuilding Jerusalem. And when he finally arrives in Jerusalem, he gathers the people together and he begins to tell them exactly what we read there in Nehemiah chapter 2 and verse 17. He said, ye see the distress that we're in. And he rallies them together saying, come, let us build. Now, today for us, we stand in a similar kind of moment. Not a moment of ruin and destruction, but a moment of opportunity that we need to seize and move forward. God has been very good to us as a church. He has given us a group. He has given us unity, I believe, and He has given us a work to do. But now we must ask, will we just stay right here where we are? Brother Sam and Miss Charlotte say, no, I'm kidding. Will we stay right where we are? Or will we step forward in faith and build? Well, that's what we want to do, is step forward in God's time in faith and build. Several things about this passage of Scripture that I want you to see. First, there is the reality that we must see. The reality of the situation that's before us. Nehemiah, once he spoke to the people, he said, "Ye see the distress that we are in." Before there can ever be progress, there must be some honest evaluation of where we are. Nehemiah began with the reality of his situation. He brought the people face to face with the truth that the walls were broken down, that the gates were burned, that the city was in great distress, or it was in a very bad or evil situation, and that they were a reproach to God, and that was not right. That was not something that they should settle for and accept. They should be doing something about it. Nehemiah did not exaggerate at all the reality of the situation. He did not minimize the situation, and he did not ignore the situation. He simply said, "Ye see." In other words, this is real. This is where we are at. And today we must do the very same thing. Not with discouragement, but with clarity. God certainly has blessed our church. That is undeniable to me. But we must also recognize our reality, that we are meeting in a home, and that it is a temporary situation, and we don't need to allow it to continue on and on and on. We are meeting in a home. Space is limited, and sometimes parking is limited, and growth and the potential for growth is limited as well. An important truth about growing is that if we do not prepare for growth, we will never see growth. And eventually, we will stall out any growth. Most churches do not decline or grow stagnant simply because God stops blessing them. They decline because they fail to see what God is wanting to do, and they do not prepare for it. They do not lay the track on which the train can run. Did you know that the train can only run down track that's been laid? And if we don't lay down the track, the train will never run down it. Seeing this reality is not a lack of faith on our part. It's actually the beginning of faith. Faith does not ignore problems. It looks at them and says, this is not right. God can do something about this. And we must go about figuring out how and when God wants to take care of it. It is the reality of our situation that we must see. And I think you see those things about Gospel Light Baptist Church. Secondly, Nehemiah had the vision that God had given him. In verse 17, he said, "Come and let us build up the wall of Jerusalem." Now, Nehemiah did not just point out all the problems without coming up with a plan or a solution. It always has bothered me of people who always want to point out problems, but they never present any solutions. They never take time. They're quick to criticize someone, but they never come back with a better way to do it. I don't know why that bothers me so, but it just tends to be the way people are. But Nehemiah presented a path forward. Nehemiah's plan was not impulsive or reactionary. Before Nehemiah ever spoke publicly to anyone, he did his work privately. Look at Nehemiah chapter 2, verse number 13. Nehemiah got to Jerusalem. Verse 11 says, "So I came to Jerusalem and was there 3 days. And I arose in the night, I and some few men with me. Neither told I any man what my God had put in my heart to do at Jerusalem. Neither was there any beast with me, save the beast that I rode upon. And I went out by night, by the gate of the valley, even before the dragon well, and to the dung port, and viewed the walls of Jerusalem, which were broken down, and the gates thereof were consumed with fire. Then I went on to the gate of the fountain, and to the king's pool, but there was no place for the beast that was under me to pass. Then I went up in the night by the brook, and viewed the wall, and turned back, and entered by the gate of the valley, and so returned. And the rulers knew not whither I went, or what I did. Neither had I as yet told it to the Jews, nor to the priests, nor to the nobles, nor to the rulers, nor to the rest that did the work." So Nehemiah had done a lot of private searching and praying and asking and evaluating. He examined the damage that was there and assessed what it would take to rebuild the wall. This tells us that godly vision is not reckless or irresponsible. It is very prayerful, thoughtful, measured, and forward-looking. Nehemiah had a God-given vision of what God wanted done, and his words to the people were very simple and powerful. "Come and let us build." He made it clear, we're going to build a wall. He made it attainable. He laid it out step by step. And he made it a shared work. "Let us build," he said. Like Nehemiah, what I want to present to you today is not just a fanciful dream about some direction or a baseless hope without structure and thought. It is about God's potential path forward for Gospel Light Baptist Church. I want to show you a site plan of what I think is a possible way and direction we can go long out into the future. I'll show a building plan broken into a couple of phases and a realistic plan of how we can grow into that as God provides. I'm not saying that I want us to attempt to do everything that I'm going to show you today. It is biting off much more than we can currently chew, okay? But what I am saying is, let's get a vision and a plan and begin moving forward together. God rarely shows everything He is doing all at once. Instead, He gives enough light for the next step. Just like Abraham, when he was called out of Ur of the Chaldees, God called him and said, "I want to make you the father of a great nation." And He called him out to go unto a land that he knew not of. He went out not knowing where he was going, but he had been given enough light to make those first few steps. That's how God leads. He leads progressively. And it is the vision that God has given us. Then I want us to see in the passage the unity that God requires. Verse number 18, their response to what Nehemiah had said. And they said, "Let us rise up and build." Now, this might be one of the most important parts of the whole passage, because one man's vision without unity of the group accomplishes very little. Nothing, in fact. Notice their response. They did not say, well, they did not say, "That sounds good, Nehemiah. You go get them." "You got my approval. Go ahead." That's not what happened. They didn't say, "Well, we'll think about it," or "You just handle it." They said, "Let us. Let us." And that statement changes everything, doesn't it? When you get to Nehemiah chapter 3 and begin reading, you find out that this was indeed a shared work. There were families building together. There were priests building, merchants building, individuals repairing their portion. Everyone had a section of wall in which they were building and working. And this is exactly how God's work does work still today. It is to be done with everyone carrying their load. There's different aspects to the work. There is foremost prayer. Prayer that has to be done. Everyone should be praying for the work. But let me tell you, God does call some people to a ministry of prayer that goes above and beyond what the average person prays. Anna is a good example in Luke chapter 2. When Jesus is brought into the temple when he's 8 days old to observe the law and be circumcised, Anna is one of the ladies in the temple. It says who never departed from the temple, but that she had a ministry of prayer and fasting. She served, I think it says she served God with prayers and fasting. That was her service unto God. So listen, we may look at somebody and watch someone and say, well, they're not contributing to, wait a minute. There are some who can't do the physical work. There are some who cannot do things that are visible to us. But may I tell you that we are not going to go any further than someone who is committed to prayer. And I am thankful that we have some folks in our church who are committed to praying for Gospel Light Baptist Church. It is their ministry. It is their service. And it wouldn't surprise me when we get to heaven if we find out all the blessings that we're enjoying as a church family found their foundation in the prayers of those people. Prayer is so important. Everyone has a place and a job to do. There are those who pray extra, more than what the average person prays. There are those who give. Everyone should be giving. But there are those who have been blessed very much materially, and you can give more than someone else. And that may be what God would have you do and the part that God would have you to play. Then there are those who serve. Some serve more than others and can serve more than others. Some are not physically able to do some of the things. There are those who encourage, and everyone should be encouraging one another, but there are those who have the gift of encouragement, and they are able to say the right thing at the right time, and they're made aware of someone who's having a struggle, and they give a word of encouragement that spurs them on to keep on going. You never know what a word of encouragement has done in the lives of people, and every one of us has probably been in a point in our life where we needed some encouragement. But there are those who encourage others in their work. And then some labor physically. These are very obvious ones that you see and know and do, and they really are giving, and it's seen of men. And they're gladly giving their time and energy and effort in trying to get some things done that physically have to be done. We need all of this. And the church needs every one of you to play your part. That's exactly how God's work gets done. There is no such thing as a spectator in the work of God. If this is the church that God has put us in, then God has a work for you to do in and through this church. Unity is not everyone doing the same thing, but it is everyone doing their part to accomplish the same goal, the unity that God requires. Then in this passage, I also see the opposition we should expect. In Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 19, we see that very plainly with Sanballat and Tobiah and Geshem, who laughed us to scorn and despised us, Nehemiah said. And here's what they would say. What is this thing that ye do? Will ye rebel against the king? Of course, they're just there to criticize and put down. They don't care what is true. They didn't care that Nehemiah had permission from the king. They didn't even check that out. They're just trying to dissuade other people from joining in and stop the work from being done. But opposition is inevitable. When the work begins for God, the critics always appear. The Sanballats and Tobiahs, they mock, saying, what is this thing that you do? And anytime you move forward for God, you will face criticism. You will have times and seasons of doubt that you struggle with. You will have resistance. You will have the people who are speaking against what you're doing, who are spreading lies or misinformation. And it can be discouraging. It may not always come from the outside. And sometimes it comes from within. There's even issues within our own hearts in the form of fear, saying, what if this doesn't work? You ever get off into something and believe that's what it needs to be, and then you get to the point and you say, oh man, I don't know. We're going to be able to deal with this? Or is this going to work out? Regarding finances, how can we afford that? Well, yeah, it's going to be much more than what we can see us paying for. Difficult challenges. Boy, this seems like a lot. But Nehemiah's focus was set. He knew what God had done in his heart and what God had called him to do and what the right thing to do was. And therefore, God was going to provide the means and measure to do what needed to be done. His focus was set. He refused to be distracted. Later on in Nehemiah chapter 6 and verse 3, there was still Tobiah trying to work a way to get Nehemiah off the wall and get him away from the work so that the workers would become discouraged and give up. But he would not succumb to their plan or grant them an interview. His reply was, I am doing a great work so that I cannot come down. He understood if you listen to every voice, you will lose your focus. And as we know from this morning's message, we cannot lose our focus. The presence of opposition, of course, is not the sign that we're wrong. It's the sign that we are doing something right. There's going to be opposition when you stand for God and serve Him. And then I want you to notice in this passage as well the confidence that we can have. Verse 18. Notice what he said. Then I told them of the hand of my God, which was good upon me. Nehemiah's confidence was not in the response of the people. Nehemiah's confidence was not in the fact that the materials were all in rubble. I mean, who would have confidence in that? They picked up those rubble, broken pieces and put them back together. It was not in the plan that he had formulated as to how to go about rebuilding the wall. His confidence was in the fact that God's hand could clearly be seen in the work that he was wanting to do. And if we today would just pause and think back of how God's hand has been on Gospel Light Baptist Church. As you know, I never intended to start a church. Not until I was forced to, almost. I never intended it. And then when we met and the response was so good, it became very clear that's what needed to be done. And then moving forward and the offerings, that monies that we have collected, being able to purchase property with cash. And at closing, the people who were selling us the property, telling us the story of how they came across the property and how A&H Properties stood for all his properties. And that he and his partner had prayed when they purchased the property and asked God that he would get all the glory for their endeavor in purchasing that property. And now a church is going to be there. I can tell you other things, and one other thing that has happened recently is that in getting the site plan and getting things together for it, met with the folks at Lamar County, and this year they installed a county engineer that reviews all the site plans and plans that are submitted for approval. And so normally an engineer would require an engineer stamp on plans. Now, I'm not an engineer. I don't have a stamp. I don't have a license. I can do all the work and all the calculations, but I just don't have the stamp. And that's what I do. I do the work, and my boss reviews them and stamps them and sends them out. So some of the things, I talked with him, and he said that he would require having an engineer do this. Well, this is thousands of dollars for a plan. And so I called up an engineer, and I met with them and discussed that, and they graciously agreed that I could do the work and present the plan and do all the calculations, and that they would verify and confirm some of the calculations and plan and the grading and all of that. They would stamp it and meet those requirements for a fee. And I was like, okay, a reduced fee of doing this and getting it done. This is great. And so a little over a week ago, the man emailed me and he said, I've been thinking a lot about your site plan. He said, we're going to do all of this, and he listed all the things that we had agreed, and he said, we're going to do this at no cost to you. And just time and time and time again, we see that God's hand is in this. It's not us. And I can move forward with confidence because I've seen God's hand at work. And I hope that you can too. Our confidence is not in ourselves or our resources or even the plan that will be presented today. It is in God and His hand upon the work He wants done. God has provided. God has sustained. God has blessed us. And this church did not come into existence or come this far by accident. It has come because God's hand is upon it. And we should take great courage today. The same God who started the work with Nehemiah's heart, sustained that work until it was done, is the same God that we are serving today. 1 Thessalonians 5:24 says, faithful is He that calleth you, who also will do it. The people responded to Nehemiah's words to come and let us rise up and build. And that was their response. They didn't have finished walls, completed gates, or a guarantee that things would go smoothly. But what they did have is they had a very clear vision of what God wanted done. They had a unified spirit in seeing that it was done. And they had a confident faith in God that God was going to get it done. And let me remind you today, all of this is not about a building. It's not about a building. It's about souls that would be saved. It's about families that will be helped. It's about children that will be raised for God. It's about a gospel witness and testimony in this community. Buildings do not change lives, but they create a space where lives can be changed by the preaching of God's Word. And that's what we want to do. So I want to show you some of the things that I've got together, and it is a possible path forward for us. And of course, any of this, all of this could go away if we needed it to. If we decided to as a church, that's it. But it's just some of the groundwork that I have laid for us to possibly move forward.